Have you ever found it really difficult to get back into songwriting after a holiday, vacation, or perhaps an emergency? Or maybe you've taken a longer break away from music because life happens and have struggled to get back on the bandwagon. Well, you are not alone. Restarting after a break can sometimes feel like pushing a boulder up a hill. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to restart your creativity gently, without guilt, and I'm going to share with you why it's not even about discipline at all. Before we get into that though, if you're new here, my name is Celine, and I've been writing songs now for over 3 decades. And over the years, I found myself climbing back on the songwriting bandwagon after every time I've taken a little extra break in my music routine. And sometimes that climb has been easier than others. On one occasion, I even fell out with music altogether and took a really big step away for a number of years. But now I've established a re-entry routine, triple R if you will, that helps me re-establish my songwriting routine whenever there's been a temporary disturbance or a big life change. And if you're anything like me, it is so easy to beat yourself up for taking time to do other things, especially when you're juggling things like life, family, jobs, health. But finding your way back to creativity is always positive, even if it doesn't feel like it. So this is all about how I get back into the rhythm, even when life gets in the way. But first, let's just address how important it is as a creative person to take time off, to rest, recuperate, and just be with your important people. Personally, I very much need that sometimes, to have the experiences and the adventures that enables me to write my best songs. Because living life is an essential part of the creative process. But all too often, those life interruptions are not creatively inspiring. Work changes, illness, things like that. But it's very important to remember that breaks in your songwriting do not mean failure. Now, I do talk a lot on this channel about how important I think writing daily is, but that is within reason. I am not a huge fan of the hustle culture that we hear so much about these days, especially as a creative person. In fact, I would say I believe the exact opposite of hustle culture. I think creativity has seasons, that you go through these seasons and they ebb and flow in your creative process and routine. But what we do need to avoid, and I count myself when I say this because sometimes I feel this negativity slipping in, is not to jump on the guilt spiral of, oh, I was doing so well, or why is it so hard to get back into something after a break? It's like you feel like you need to catch up because taking a break has somehow set you back. And this is especially true when we set ourselves deadlines and goals, because it's easy to feel like we've let those goals and those deadlines down. But the truth is, you don't need to catch up. You just need to reconnect. Some people will tell you you need more discipline, but that really doesn't help me at all. In fact, I don't think discipline is what I need. Discipline is about control, but creativity needs to have flow and consistency. And when we talk about consistency, I don't mean having a daily streak that's never been broken or not having a day off. It's all about having a way or a method or a route to return to your creativity so you can start a new streak. And what I feel that I need, and hopefully that's why you're watching this video, that you guys might need, is a system to restart, not a punishment plan. So that's why I've created my very own re-entry ritual to avoid this exact thing. So let's get into it. So let's start by saying I've actually created a free downloadable PDF to accompany this re-entry routine so that you can follow along and have some guidance away from this video. And you might want to grab that now, the link is in the description, before we kind of get into the crux of everything. And I also think that I should mention that in my own practice of this re-entry routine, I don't always get through all 5 steps. And that's okay, because sometimes I'm back on the bandwagon before I reach step 5. I find that steps 1 and 2 are essential, and by the time I've got to the end of step 2, I might already be kind of back in a creative flow and the creative juices might be engaged. And then sometimes I find I use steps 3, 4 and 5 kind of independently, depending on how I feel and how things are going after step 1 and 2. But what I do encourage you guys to do is, if it's your first time going through this process, to work through all 5 of the steps to see how you feel about each one and then adjust them for your own needs. There are going to be ones that you have more energy for or excite you, but also be open to the idea that next time you might want to follow a different set of the 5. So step 1 is to reconnect. And when I say reconnect, I want you to reconnect with the why. Why are you a songwriter? Why do you write songs in the first place? And I'm gonna guess that we all have very different reasons why we write songs, but I'm also gonna guess that there are a lot of similarities between those reasons. We love music. We love how music makes us feel. And I'm sure that we all thrive with the creative process, or we wouldn't be songwriters at all, right? So this step for me is very much a listening process. I have a playlist with all my favourite songs of all time on there, and I listen to that playlist sometimes while I'm out for a walk, sometimes while I'm at the gym, and I get these little inclinations of inspiration from some of the people that I value and believe are the best songwriters in the world. Sometimes I'm also listening to that playlist while I'm journaling and I'm picking up on ideas from the songs I'm listening to. I try and remember where I was when I first heard that song, or who does that song remind me of while I'm journaling. And every now and again I might pick one of those really great songs and critically listen to it and analyse why I think this is a great song. And sometimes I can then learn some new techniques that I want to try. Oh, I didn't really realise that in this song, so I'm going to try that. And that can sometimes really get those creative juices flowing again as I make notes. I'm a very analytical person. I think song analysis is a really important part of being a songwriter, and I'm currently working on something a little bit exciting around song analysis that I'll share with you a bit further down the line. And this is such a powerful re-entry process for me. Spending time with the songs and the songwriters that I love, that inspired me to become a songwriter, really kickstarts that jump onto the bandwagon of songwriting again. There is nothing more exciting for me than finding something new in an existing favourite song. The next step for me is to review where I left off. So I go back through my notebook, my lyric book, my voice notes, and I try and work out where I was before I had the break. Quite often, revisiting my last project and where I left off with it is really inspiring to get started again on that same project. So this is the time I want you to ask yourselves, what was I working on last? What was the last thing that I was writing? Was it a song idea? Maybe just even a title? Or have you got like half a demo in your DAW that you could kind of jump into and pick up on? But sometimes all it takes is for me to go back through my voice memos, and I'm a big believer and user of voice memos on my phone. And I listen to all the crazy ideas and dictations that I make into the voice memos app before I had my kind of life interruption. And often that inspires me to add something or pick up my guitar and then try something new with that idea. Other times, just looking back through some random lyric ideas or hooks, titles even, in my notebook, so that maybe it sparked a bit of inspiration that it didn't have initially when I wrote it down. And I'm pretty sure I've mentioned on this channel before that on my phone in the Apple Notes app, I have a section for songs, full songs with chords. I also have a section for titles and hooks and little song snippet ideas. And while I'm reviewing all those different bits from voice notes to Apple Notes, I often find something that I want to tinker with, and I'm already back in that creative process because I'm tinkering with an idea as well. Oh, and side note, did you know that you can now record a voice note directly in Apple Notes app? And it can also be used to transcribe your voice into text, kind of like a dictation feature, but I have found that so useful since I've discovered it. I found myself talking to the voice notes in the Apple Notes app while I'm out for a walk, or sometimes while I'm at the gym, occasionally when I'm out and about and I haven't got my notebook to hand, rather than actually writing and typing, it is so much quicker and easier to talk into it and get it transcribed in that notes app. And then being able to put actual recordings, little demo recordings, little scratch ideas in the notes themselves with the lyrics has become a really fundamental part of my kind of song idea development process now. And it's definitely something that I'm going to be taking advantage of more in the future. So step 3 is to reset your focus. And the first 2 steps, we're looking back of what you were doing before you've had this kind of interruption to your songwriting. But this step is the first one to look forwards to creating new stuff specifically. And it's important to incorporate what you were doing before, but also to kind of get that momentum started creating new ideas, new song lyrics. When I say reset, I mean don't expect too much from yourself, because in the end you might let yourself down. Ooh, hold on, I need to write that down. That's got song lyric written all over it. What I want you to do is to start small with one small simple exercise that takes 10-15 minutes max. And it could be just spending a little bit of time playing your instrument, noodling around on your guitar, tinkering around on the piano. Or it could be a 15-minute title sprint to kind of generate as many titles as you can think of in 15 minutes. There are so many different ways you can be songwriting in a very short space of time. And in my book, Level Up Your Lyrics, I have got 30 short exercises that you can do on a daily basis by spending 10 minutes on your craft. These are perfect for this kind of injection of focus to reset everything and start something fresh without the need of having to come up with too much of the idea yourself. It's almost like a stepping stone or a helping hand to get back on the bandwagon. The exercises in the book take no more than 15 minutes, and they're designed to be reusable so that you can dip back into them at any point. I often find myself dipping in there when I need a little bit of a help and a stepping stone back onto my bandwagon. If you're interested in the book, I'm going to put a link in the description below and you can pick it up from your local Amazon store. Step 4 is all about realigning your goals specifically. So if you're like me, you set yourself goals for your songwriting. They could be monthly, quarterly, yearly, whatever they are. Goals can be such positive drivers for your creative process. But sometimes, as a creative person, they can also be a massive source of guilt and pressure. And especially after the break, they could even build up to anxiety, which as a creative person, we do not want that. And also, just out of your own personal goals, you may have set yourself some deadlines for a release date of a song, or because you're working in a collaborative project and you put a lot of pressure on yourself to meet those deadlines. But whatever those goals or deadlines might be, I want you to go back over them and we're going to realign them to the truth and the realistic timeframes that we now have. Realigning your creative targets to where you're at now, not where you thought you were going to be or where you wish you were in the process. After any kind of break, it is important to be realistic, and realistic as your life is now. Because when we set our goals or deadlines, we don't know what's going to be coming in the future. We don't know what's going to happen and what might affect our ability to achieve those goals. Things take precedence in any given time frame, and things shift because of priorities. And I believe it is not a failing if you need to reassess and realign those goals. What I do now is actually quarterly goals. Instead of setting one big long year goal, I break the year down into quarters and I set myself quarterly goals. And when I'm doing those quarterly goals, they include a quarterly review at the end of each quarter to assess where I am at with those goals and whether or not I need to shift or realign what the goal is actually going to be achievable based on what I've been able to achieve that previous quarter. Now, it sounds a little bit complicated, but I'll explain it better now. I spent far too much time setting one big long year goal in January. Everyone sets goals in January. But I would set a goal for the end of the year, I want to write X number of songs. And then every now and again I would get to like June, July, August time and say to myself, well, I'm really far behind on that goal. I should have been doing so many per month and I've not even done even half of that. So what's the point? There's no point working towards this goal anymore. And I would give up. But since I've been doing quarterly goals and quarterly reviews especially, I found that I can readjust my expectations of what I can achieve. I can reprioritize things for the coming months to make sure I can get myself back on track, or I adjust the goal itself to make it more reasonable. I still challenge myself, but I don't push myself out of comfort boundaries or out of realistic boundaries to the point where I feel like a failure. And that is so important for us as creative people. We need to make sure that we're challenging ourselves, but we're also not disappointing ourselves. And I find that realigning my goals on a quarterly basis in that quarterly review I do really helps keep my momentum going. I don't get to that brick wall of oh, I can't do it anymore, there's no point. What I do instead is say, I'm a little bit behind on where I should be, so there's two things I can do. I can shape my priorities for the coming months so I can get back on track, or I can just readjust my goal for the end of the year back down a little bit, but still keep the challenge up. And step number 5 is to reflect, and reflect gently. You're a human at the end of the day, and a creative human, and your creativity is precious. It's important that we honour the pause and the break that we've had and move forward with kindness to ourselves. Now, I know that sounds a little bit woo-woo, and I do mean it to be, because actually one of the things that I found that I don't do enough is be kind to myself and appreciate that life has happened and things go astray and are not where we want to be at any given point. But if I'm not actually angry at myself, it does not help my creative process one bit. And I do this, as I mentioned in the previous step, my quarterly reviews. And at the end of each quarter, I spend quite a bit of time over a course of a week, just reviewing, reflecting, and kind of looking at how I've been for the past month and how I want to be going forwards into the next months. And to do this process, you can ask yourself questions such as, how does songwriting make me feel? Or, if I wrote a song today that was 100% just for me, what would that sound like and what would that song be about? Now, you can do this as a journaling exercise, or just kind of having a think as you're out for your daily walk, for example. And there are so many different ways that you can ask yourself this question. And I want you to do it, but looking forward. Part of the free PDF link down in the description covers a few of them for you if you want to dip in. But also you can ask ChatGPT to come up with some reflection questions, or ask some friends and a support group, songwriting group, if they've got any ideas on how you can reflect in this way. But I want you to remember that reflection is about learning, not punishing yourself. It's actually quite easy, if it's the first time you've ever done this kind of reflection or review, to punish yourself and concentrate on the negatives. But I really want you to work hard to find the positives to go forward with. Your creative energy is important to you, just like mine is important to me. And I like to make sure that this reflection process steers it forwards and protects it, not reprimand it. So that's everything covered in my re-entry ritual or routine. You don't need to force your way back into songwriting. There are things that you can do from these 5 steps that we've gone through, because you're giving yourself the route back in. And this is why I think that this 5-step process, brimming with alliteration, is such a great tool for those times when you need to get back on the bandwagon. So let me know in the comments if you've got anything specific that helps you get back into songwriting after you've taken a break. I'd love to have that conversation with you. And if you want more information on short songwriting exercises that we mentioned in section 3, check out this video here, you might find it useful. See you in the next one.